multi-sport, and the ones who tend to get hurt are what I would call multi-team, where they're playing the same sport but on 2 or 3 different teams at the same time. Those are the ones who tend to have problems. Tend to have hip issues and hamstring issues and overuse stuff. And again, because you're like you said, this is, audience and younger. I always tell everybody, kids should not have adult problems. You shouldn't have kids with tendonitis. You shouldn't have kids with achy hips and sore backs. Those to me are massive red flags that something is very drastically wrong with what you're doing, and it's time to back off. And that's the other thing I think people have to look at and realize, that if you've got a kid who's in sort of the 11 to 15 age group and is playing club, it's kind of like, okay, you don't have to worry day to day. You should be worrying year to year, because whatever pot of gold you think might be at the end of the rainbow in terms of a college scholarship or whatever it is that you're dreaming about is still a long way away. And the best way to get it is with that consistency. It's the biggest thing. If you read Slight Edge.
I have.
Yeah. So I always talk about Slight Edge in terms of Jeff Olson talks about. It's really simple, right? He says showing up is Slight Edge principle number 1. Showing up consistently is Slight Edge principle number 2. And showing up consistently with a great attitude is Slight Edge principle number 3. But you got to get them to show up, and you've got to get them to show up consistently.
Are you finding that some of these kids they're opting to be on 2 school teams, or their club team and their school team, and the first thing to get out of their schedule is strength training?
Absolutely. We were just talking about that the other day on our strengthcoach.com site, and Scott Hansen, who's out in San Diego, was saying that it's always the first thing to go, I can't make lifting.
Yeah.
And that's the easy way out. And the problem, and I think you and I know exactly what I'm talking about, but we're talking to people that don't get involved in the same conversations probably on Twitter. But it is that, like, parents are really well intentioned. None of them are trying to screw up their kid. None of them are trying to do what's wrong. They just don't understand the process of making a child better at something. They think adults are under the mistaken impression that the way you get your child better at something is to have your child focus. And that's just not true. It's actually, you want your kid. The evidence is so overwhelming that making your kid a really good generalist, it's sort of like you want your kid to be a really great soccer player, then probably get them out of soccer at some point during the course of the year. Get them in the weight room. Again, if you've got younger kids, get them into tumbling, get them into gymnastics. My daughter just left yesterday to go and play professional hockey. She's going to Buffalo. She signed with one of the women's professional teams. And she was a great little soccer player when she was a kid. And she would get tripped, and she would simply do forward rolls and get right back up and running. People would be like, she got tripped and knocked down, and then she just rolled and got back up. I'm like, yeah, that's because we took her to gymnastics when she was little, and she understands how her body works, and she thinks nothing of, rolling herself up into a ball. And she'd come off the field doing cartwheels, and she's a shorter, stockier, sturdier looking kid who you wouldn't expect to be able to roll around and do cartwheels. But that was gymnastics background. And so I think getting them, making the base broader in the beginning, whether that be, weight room or whether that be other sports, is really important for these people. Yet we think, like for you or I, if we said, hey, I want to be great at something, then we got to really dial in and say, okay, I want to be a great strength and conditioning coach, and I got